Shaloha and welcome to the first of a series of Facebook Lives. I'm going to do a Facebook Live during the days of awe. That is from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. So every day in between, I will be here at the same time doing a Facebook Live talking about some element of Mussar and awe. Now you might wonder about Shaloha. Well, that is a phrase I learned the one year we did our Passover Seder in Hawaii. We were on the Big Island. They have a wonderful community there, and we were under this big cabana on the beach. And I learned that, as you probably know, the word shalom in Hebrew means hello, goodbye, or peace. Well, you may have heard of the term aloha, which also means hello, goodbye, and peace. And the leader of the service went on to talk about all these really cool connections between Hawaii and Israel and the Hawaiian language and Israel. And it was such a wonderful Seder because it brought together Jewish people from all over the world. On the table next to us, there was a family from Mexico. And they didn't speak any English, but all of a sudden during the service, this little 4-year-old got up on the chair and started singing in Hebrew. And he was using the same tune that I knew and the same tune that our kid did. And it was really neat. We heard the 4 questions in English, in Hebrew, in Spanish, in Hawaiian, in Japanese, in Klingon, in Jamaican Pidgin. And it was a moment that brought a little awe to me because it helped remind me that we were all of the same people. So today's topic is awe as a path to meaning and purpose. I'm sort of new to Facebook Live, so occasionally if it flashes up a little something, I might go and take a peek. But anyway, we're talking about awe and meaning and purpose. So as we begin to talk about that, let's define our terms. So first let's talk about meaning and purpose. And if you're looking for meaning and purpose in your life, I think it depends a lot on who's asking the question. And the way I think about this, again, I'm a little bit on a little bit of a Passover kick tonight. I know, wrong holiday season, but you might remember from the Seder we have the story of the 4 sons or the 4 children, and depending on who they are, they ask a different question. So the first one is the one that's so young they don't even know what to ask. Okay, and that kind of reminds me of something that one of my students said where, you know, when I was in my 20s or 30s, I was hardly awake at all. And being awake, being mindful and being present, how present and mindful you already are depends on how you ask that question. So if you are not at all mindful, you're like the simplest child who doesn't even know to ask a question. So if I don't know if you feel like you're in that category. I think we all are in all of these categories at some point. But if you're just kind of curious and finding out what that's all about, I would say that finding meaning and purpose in life is about waking up. It's about learning to ask those questions, because finding the answer depends upon us. It depends upon our spiritual curriculum. Now maybe you're like the more simple child who says, well, what does this all mean? Well, I would give the same answer. It's learning to find those answers for yourself. Now maybe you're like the angry child who's like, well, what is this? Why am I even here? What does this have to do with me? And I have been that angry person before. My Rosh Hashanah started wonderfully yesterday. We went to services. We had a nice time. But then when we all got kind of home and overtired, I got a little bit cranky. I got a little bit irritable. You know, I was totally lost touch with kind of the meaning and purpose that I was trying to find in my life. And so maybe you're like me, where you're kind of on that journey. It's like, yeah, I want to wake up. I want to feel more connected. I want to become my best self, but I am getting in my own way all the time. And then maybe you're like the 4th child, which they call the wise child, or they ask a much more sophisticated question. And maybe you've been on this path seeking wisdom and seeking answers for many years, maybe longer than me, and you're kind of coming from a place where, yeah, I'm starting to kind of figure out what this is all about, but I really need to go a little bit deeper. Well, in preparation for the high holidays, I was reading, as I do every year, this book, This Is Real and You Are Completely Unprepared by Rabbi Alan Lew. And he talked about one of the scariest places to find answers. And I'm going to have a prop to help illustrate this. So this is my wife's mirror, and there are two sides to it. And the first side is just like a regular mirror. We can only find these answers by looking within. And if we're looking for meaning and purpose in our life, looking within, in the normal time, it's just like the regular side of the mirror. It's like, okay, here's my regular reflection. I can look on it. Well, at this time of the year, during the days of awe, we flip it over to like the super close. All of a sudden, here you are looking at yourself. I don't know if this sort of shows up in the Facebook Live, but it's like a magnifying glass. It's like every small blemish, every little part of you comes into focus, and it's can be painful. And that's kind of where the "we're not prepared" can come in, because really to take that close look in the mirror, nothing can really prepare you for that. So how can awe help us find answers, both to kind of find purpose and meaning in our life, and maybe to get some of those answers when we're seeing things, So here's the question. Looking at my notes here, I can't find these answers for you, but what I can do is I'll share with you some of the places and some of the things that I've learned within both the Mussar and the Jewish literature, which can help you find those answers to yourself. Now, one of the greatest books of Mussar wisdom and Jewish wisdom ever written is called Path of the Soul by Rabbi Luzzatto. It was written in, I think, the 16th century. It is it's an amazing book. I read it as part of a class this year. It really helps to have other people to read this with. And he begins the book with the following line: "A person's duty in the world is to be a servant of God." And when I first heard that, I was really a little bit unsure what the heck he was talking about. My own feelings about the divinity were kind of unclear. If you're unsure about the divinity, I want you to kind of hang in there, because there's some really interesting ways that we can connect with this. And basically, you could think about that, and what this argument is saying is that our purpose in the world is to really be a good person, and is to serve something that's greater than ourselves. So now we might say, okay, well, fine, that's all well and good. I want to share a reading with you. And if you're new to text study, what we do is we read a little bit of text, and then we kind of dig into it for deeper meaning. I'll share a copy of this text in the show notes, so if you're watching the replay, you can just go down and take a look at it. This is from something called Hagayon by Eliezer Menachem. And the idea is that if we want to kind of be a really good person, if we want to be this kind of servant to the divine, it's not something that just comes naturally, because we have, our inner issues. We have those things that hold us back. And the way that we can overcome this is through practice. So he writes, just like it is impossible to be a tailor without learning the trade, and if one does not learn shoemaking, you cannot become a shoemaker. So too is it impossible to know how to learn without learning how to learn. And when one does not learn the path of being a servant of heaven, is the phrase, you can't be like a person who's good at that. And the small amount of Mussar that one learns is the preservative that guards Torah study. So in other words, we don't have to learn this all at once. We can learn, well, what does this tradition have to teach us for finding meaning? Now, there's another teaching that I really liked. and it also kind of comes into this. Like if we're looking for, what does it mean to say, okay, well, I'm looking for meaning and purpose in my life? It almost can come from a place of real sadness, or it could come from a place of being lost. And I have certainly felt like that sometimes in my life, where I'm just kind of going along, I'm going through the grind, and I'm just like, what the heck is all of this for? And it can come from a place of real loneliness, and it can come from a place of real hurting. Gosh, what does this all mean? What am I doing with my life? Am I doing the right things? And when I start to feel that way, sometimes I say to myself, okay, I don't need to, if I'm just being a servant of the divine, I don't need to worry about how many likes I got on my Facebook post. I don't need to worry about how many people are on this video. That's not my call. All I can do is to try to show up in the world as a good person. Like right now, I can offer this teaching. I can offer from my own experience. And I think if even one person participates, if even one person gets a little bit of something and gets a little bit of inspiration to do better, that's fine. And it is so comforting when I can get into that space. When I was writing my first book, I wrote it as a serial on my blog, and I became obsessed with how many people wrote each blog post. About every week I'd put out 3 or 4 posts of 300 words and be like, how many shares and how many people read it and how much traffic and this and that. And my whole day would go up and down based on the number of blog views and that kind of stuff. And that doesn't matter at all. I mean, sure, part of me would like to have lots of readers and lots of people who are engaged. But that's not the point. That's just a way of viewing my ego. All right, my true self, the true self, the inner me, the inner divine me, what Eckhart Tolle would call our essence or our presence, doesn't matter about that, because I'm going to be fine and you're going to be fine one way or another. So again, sometimes when I'm asking, well, what is the meaning of life? What is the meaning of all this? It is just kind of coming from that place of the ego, and the ego that's hurting. I read a great piece this week by Rabbi Nossi Zivi Finkel. It was translated by Avi Fertig, and it was from Finkel's book, Or Hatzaphon. He's one of Israel Salanter's 3 primary disciples. Israel Salanter started the Mussar movement in the 19th century, and this idea, and what Rabbi Finkel wrote, was that every pathway for leading one's life, whether the mundane and the spiritual, whether communal or individual, is guided by and predicated upon the measure of our self-worth. Wow. Everything we do is predicated on the measure of our self-worth. Well, it really fits with what I was just talking about. Okay, because when I'm often saying, what's the point? It's because I'm sort of feeling bad. Okay, in Rabbi Lou's book, This is Real and We Are Unprepared, he cites a teaching from Rabbi Nachum of Breslov, who was this Hasidic rabbi, very menschy guy, just beautiful, beautiful teachings. And when we're feeling that way, like, what's the purpose of life? What we can do is we can start to look within and just find one bright spot. Just find one spark, one spot. We're created in the divine image, and sometimes our baggage gets in the way and we forget about that. But if we can just find maybe that one bright spot, that one spot where, oh yeah, I'm okay. And yeah, what's the point? Well, I held the door for somebody today as they were going in the supermarket, and they were carrying a kid, and I held the door and I smiled at them and they smiled at me. That was a good thing I did. That's a bright spot. But what's something else? Well, the cat was hungry and I fed the cat. Well, caring for animals, that's part of our way that we can be a divine servant, and the cat started purring. Okay, that was a bright spot in my life. And what Rabbi Nachum of Breslov said is we find those acts of goodness, those bright spots, And then when we start to find multiple bright spots, it can form a kind of music, a melody of goodness. And suddenly when we're playing our melody of goodness, we don't sort of worry about the purpose of life anymore because we're serving something greater. We are just more in tune with the universe. You know, in Pirkei Avot 3:8, it said that Rabbi Akiva taught that we were given two gifts. The first gift is that we were created in God's image. Okay? The second gift is that we were told that we were created in God's image. Now again, if you're not sure about the divinity, just kind of hang in there, because we're getting there. Let's just think about it. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say, well, let's say there is some kind of divine, some kind of energy that's out there, some kind of creator. Maybe you could think about it as the universe, but we have this amazing potential. And this is what was like Rabbi Nosson Sivi Finkel's whole deal. We had his reading before about everything is predicated on our self-worth. And his was very connected to this teaching by Rabbi Akiva. Not only were we created in the divine image, we were told that, which tells us we have so much potential. We have so much potential, and we have this ability to kind of tap into that divine in everyday life. We can, as Rabbi Nachum taught, look for those bright spots and create those melodies, create that connection to something higher to us. Okay, well, what's another way that we can sort of, that's all fine, Greg, and that's very esoteric maybe. Okay, how can I make this real? Okay, because in essence, Mussar is kind of, it's not a rainbows and butterflies kind of practice. And I do feel, I apologize if I've gotten a little bit of, rainbows and unicorns, okay? That's great. My life's falling apart. I have all this crappy stuff I'm dealing with. But don't worry, it's not very helpful for me to hear that suddenly, oh yeah, but by the way, I'm connected to the divine. That's true in theory, but how can I make that real? Well, in Mussar, we try to find an action to do. And in the Talmud, in Sota Tractate, Sota section 14a, it talks about walking in the ways of the divine. And it talks about some very specific ways that we can do this. So for example, in the Torah, it talks about Moses, or God burying Moses. Or it talks about God comforting Isaac after Abraham passes away. And what it says in Sota is, well, as God buries the dead, so we should bury the dead. And as God comforts the bereaved, so should we comfort the bereaved. Or God made clothing for Adam and Eve, so should we clothe the naked. So should we take care of people who don't have enough clothes, who don't have enough to eat. And by connecting with and by taking care of other people, that's how we can act in the divine. That's how we can follow through on this. So in my book, I give an example of that, where someone who's a friend of mine and someone who's in my class, his brother and sister-in-law lived at in an Orthodox community in Israel, and his sister-in-law passed away very young from cancer. And so within the Orthodox community, it is traditional for members of the community to care for the dead, to wash the bodies and to actually dig the graves. And so he's not an Orthodox person, but he said, okay, I'm going to try to do something for my sister-in-law. So he said he helped dig her grave. And he said it was one of the most meaningful things he ever did in his life. Well, here we are, serving the divine, doing exactly what it says to do in the Torah, which is to work on burying the dead. And he had one of the most meaningful experiences of his life. Now, this was a tragic situation, and it was a sad situation. But out of this, it gave him a chance to give something back which could never possibly be repaid. Now, we hope that we don't encounter these tragedies or these losses very often, and when they happen, we do have an opportunity to reach out to people we know and to offer them comfort after a loss. We have an opportunity to go to the Shiva. And so as you're reflecting on your year and these days of awe, At some point during the next year, somebody you know is going to lose someone. Maybe it's an acquaintance from the synagogue, maybe it's a coworker. And that's an opportunity to bring meaning to the world and to bring meaning to the life, to be there. You know, there's opportunities to open doors for people, to help build the world through kindness. And again, when we're feeling bad and we're wondering, what is the point of this all? What can we do for somebody else? Now, maybe we're sort of saying, what's the point of this all? Because we're always doing stuff for other people, and we're not giving ourselves the kind of care and nurturing. Because we have that divine spark too. We need to make sure we're taking time to care for ourselves. And it could be something as simple as taking a nice bath or a shower, going for a walk, getting out in nature. It might be singing. It might be connecting with the divine in some other way. I mean, is there anything more divine than nature? Like, did you check out that eclipse a couple of months ago or a month ago? I got those glasses and I watched it. It's incredible. It's amazing. And the Baal Shem Tov said that we are surrounded by miracles every day, but we put our small hands in front of our eyes and we don't see. So this practice of becoming again present and slowing things down is another way to do this. I want to close with just one more idea, and again it's coming back to the divine. And many people look outside of Judaism for their spiritual practice, and they find that the institutions of Judaism, they don't necessarily relate to the prayers, they don't necessarily relate to what's going on in services. But they look at a book by Dan Siegel and they say, wow, he's created this wheel, and it shows that we're connected to all living things. Or wow, in Buddhism or in other types of yoga or spirituality, there's this idea that we're all connected and that we're all one. Well, it might interest you to know that that same idea exists in Judaism. And there's this meditative prayer by Rabbi Yoel Glick that I love, and I'll put a link to that. It's in his book, Living a Life of Jewish Meditation, I think. And he talks about the Shema prayer. Now, I suspect even the most disconnected Jew has heard of the Shema. It's Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Well, Rabbi Glick goes through this word by word. And Israel, it's a people, but it's also a spiritual mission to try to find meaning in the world. And the Lord our God, Adonai Eloheinu, he says that's the God of compassion. Compassion is mentioned over and over again in the Torah. So here's a divinity that's with us all the time. I wear this great bracelet with a little hamsa on it that I got from Fairtrade Judaica, and it's a little hand, and it reminds me, I think, okay, well, no matter what's going on, at least the divine is with me to hold my hand. But then the last part is Adonai Echad, God is one. Now, when I was a kid, I saw, okay, God is one, and I asked my dad, and he said, well, it means there's one God. It's just a reminder there's one God. And I'm like, okay, wow, ooh, that's really helpful. But Rabbi Yoel has a different interpretation, which is more, and I don't think this is unique to him, I think I just hadn't been exposed to this Jewish idea, is that the God's a part of everything. Everything is with God and of God. And so now when I hear the Lord is one, I think it's the Lord is one with everything. It's that same idea that people find in yoga or find in Buddhism or find in these other places. You know, it's not some God that's over there. It's a God that's here, and it's part of us, and it's with us. Now, maybe the rational part of your brain is going, I'm not kind of getting this, and if I allow my ego to get too involved, I find that a little bit scary and overwhelming. But if I just step back and realize that I'm a part of something greater than myself, I am at one with the whole world. Eckhart Tolle does a wonderful job of explaining these things. And he said, well, you can think of yourself as a drop of water, and it's part of a wave. And when you're thinking yourself as that wave, you start looking around and going, am I bigger than these other waves? Are those other waves going to make a bigger splash? Or you can think of yourself as part of the ocean. I'm no separate from those other waves around me. We're all one. We're all connected. And so when we're living our life, if we're looking for a life of meaning and purpose, this connection to something greater than ourselves, is one way to feel that. Now this is how it's meaningful to me, but I would love to know how this is meaningful to you, because when we're looking for meaning and purpose, it's really an answer that we have to find for ourselves. Now, if you'd like to maybe dig in a little bit deeper with Mussar and to try to find some of these answers for yourself, there's some free resources on AmericanMussar.com. If you look on the Facebook page, there's a link to the Soul Trait quiz where you can start looking at those things inside yourself and, well, what maybe areas do you have to want to work on a little bit more? I also have a special offer during these days of awe where if you'd like to get started on a Mussar journey a little bit deeper, you can look for the offer and you can get a copy of the book, the mantra cards that go with it, and then a 13-week, for 13 weeks you'll get a video and an email which will tell you about how to practice and how to connect with a bunch of different soul traits. Again, that's only if you're interested, only if you would like to. I usually charge like about $50 for all of these things, or 60, 72. I don't know. I'm not a mathematician anymore. I'm in my heart space. I'm not in my math space. But right now you can get all of that whole package for $36. And if that's of interest to you, great. If not, that's fine. Again, you can actually, if you take the Soul Trait quiz, you'll get like the first 4 emails absolutely free if you're still kind of getting to know Mussar. I hope that today is Friday, and so if you're Jewish, you know that tonight Shabbat begins. It's the Sabbath. I hope that you can really enjoy tonight and tomorrow, whatever your religion may be. I hope that you can take a little bit of time out of your ordinary life, take advantage of these days of awe, because hey, why do we do things, or why don't we do things? Well, we feel like we're the only one, and I want you to know you are not alone. There are millions of people all over the world that are taking some time out just to rest and relax. There are millions of people all over the world that are using these days to look within and to try to turn that mirror over just a little bit more. They're taking an extra close look, not to find the badness, but to find the opportunities, to do better. Because we all have that opportunity to do better. That's the beauty of this time of year. It's all about tshuva. It's about repentance. And repentance isn't about saying it's sorry. It's about saying, how can I do it better the next time? Because as long as we're alive, we have another chance to get it right and to do better. Shabbat Shalom. And if you like this, please give us some likes. Please give us some shares. And please ask some questions. I'm going to be doing this every day, and I'll try to cover the other topics as we move forward. Shabbat Shalom.